I'll do the roll call.
Yes, Neil, you ready? Let me call to order the Ways and Means Committee for the town of Kiowa for June 3rd, 2025. Welcome, everybody. We've got a new agenda, so we don't do roll call and we don't do the Pledge of Allegiance anymore, just in case you're wondering.
I could do roll call.
So, Mr. Chair, I do know. There is a presence of a quorum. Thank you. Citizen comments. Oh, sorry. Approval of the minutes for the Ways and Means from last time. Any additions or corrections?
I think it's been
Good. With those, we'll assume they are approved. Citizen comments on agenda items. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Wyndham, Executive Director of the Kiowa Conservancy, and I'm here today to talk about the SATAX allocations. Unfortunately, I could not be at the SATAX meeting. My uncle passed away, and so I sent a staff member who will be in charge of that project. There was some questions, and I just wanted to be sure that this committee had all the answers, because I don't believe SATAX has recommended allocation for the full amount that we requested. This project has been, we're speaking of the bridge project that would be restoring the marsh. And this could be one of the largest projects in South Carolina. We would be taking a leadership role along with the town and along with South Carolina DNR to make sure that this happens. SCORE is very eager to get started on this project. We're very eager to get started on this project. But every time we do not get the full funding, or we have to go out and then additionally fundraise. This prevents us from getting all the contracts and the equipment that we need sewn up at the front end. As we've already started checking with the new tariffs and other things that are going in place, we're already seeing prices rise. So we'd like to lock in those prices and lock in our labor cost, so that we know that these devices can be implemented into the river and we can begin this project. As you know, this is a project that has been fully vetted with the Sustainability Committee, with the Sea Level Rise Committee, with the Marsh Management Committees of the town. So we feel like this is a project we're happy to manage, but just want you to give every consideration that you possibly can in seeing us fully funded for this project. We thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. While we're on this topic, let me just talk about this for just a little bit. And first, I think this is a spectacular effort. I think the Conservancy does a great job. I had a great partnership with the town for a long time. A very worthwhile project. Full stop. From a SATAX standpoint, my concern, and I voiced this at the meeting, was that the size of the project in terms of the scope maybe got beyond the bounds of what we're supposed to do with SATAX money. And when I look at the map, what's happening on this, and this map, the purple area, especially the highest part of the purple area, when you get around the far side of the bend, that part of erosion starts to concern me. I mean, it's not specifically in the SATAX guidelines or regulations that we can do river erosion. We can do beach erosion, but river erosion, when you get that far around, and you think about how it affects tourism, I start to have personally a difficult problem with how does that affect tourism. This is a natural process that's ongoing. The reestablishment and protection of the marsh is spectacular. Some of that is absolutely tourist focused, but it's the extent. For me, it's where would I draw the boundary? If you said, I want to go a mile up the river, okay, that's clearly too far. So where is the line stop for me? And so that's where we talked, and there were other people on the SATAX committee had sort of the same issue. I will tell you that, bear with me one second. Can't see, so I have to change glasses. bear with me. So five of the seven committee members did vote to fund. One was absent and one did not vote to fund. So there's a majority, and that's from a process standpoint. We'll talk more about majority in a little bit, but there was a majority to fund. So my comment, and it's really two ways and means broadly, is the committee wants to talk about kind of the guidelines and how we spend money. What's our stopping point? We can spend outside the contiguous area of Kiowa. That we know. The question is, how far outside should we? And this kind of falls under that. How far outside the bridge erosion where you've got people going down and using it, tourists, how far should we and when should we stop?
Can I address?
You can. It's.
I just
Would you go back to the podium, please? But again, let me just say, it's a worthwhile project.
I'm not.
It's where do you stop the funding?
Well, if I'm not a water engineer, so please, anything that I say is just conjecture and information that we have been provided. But water flow, if you'll watch how the boats, and these are tourists for many times, coming around, that water bend, that's the beginning of the erosion. And then that's when at the point at the bridge, it really culminates. But if we start upriver, for lack of a better word, and we address this problem upriver, then we're really addressing the problem at the bridge. Does that make sense to you?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure.
One thing that did come up in the committee was, had anybody done any work with the Coast Guard about putting a no-wake zone?
I believe the town has done this. I believe the community association has done this. I think as a community, that needs to be done irregardless of the say tax. That is a very big issue, Luke, and I do think that it needs to be addressed.
And I think that's both for the marsh and for the
And
bridge.
as far as erosion in the statute, the statute, I believe, says erosion. And erosion could be in a pond, it could be in a river, it could be, as long as it is impacting tourism. It's the way I read it. Now, I could be reading it wrong.
I actually got a lot of issues, I think, that more discussion.
Yep.
Are to the allocations and the policy underpinning this. Questions, concerns with it. I suggest we move to the rate of state tax applications and then.
Can I answer your direct question, though, real quick as we do that?
Please.
As far as the no wake, Councilmember Kay and I have both been looking into it from the infrastructure perspective as well as the resiliency perspective. And we're getting together with some experts next week, which the Conservancy's welcome to be part of, to revisit and refresh our understanding of the issue and what might we as the town or community do about that.
That particular one did not directly the state tax issues and saying that there was a legislative bias. Should
BCM.
well, I think I'm on so about it. What I can say is DEL with the state, it's not DES, DEL. Right. So it's not BCM, it's not DES, it's CR.
Okay.
But it was just a literature. This is one where think if this is something we want to do is be a concerted effort as it week out of week out to set
Wetmore.
Wetmore to get their support. We got to line up town, servants, DA, country trust, which owns a lot of property. Bought there, it gets got people use that pressure on the argument that there's
And like you and I discussed last Thursday, that's what Madeline and I talked about also, is trying to put together what would a campaign maybe look like to bring forward to address some of those things.
it is not just a mobile what yours.
Okay, and so I'm going to look for a motion to approve, and then we'll talk about these individually.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Let me give you some background as we start this discussion. So we had 15 applications. We did have a very good discussion at the SATAX about guidelines and qualifications. We had previously, when we had our organizational meeting, we talked about what's the purpose, what's the philosophy of providing SATAX money. We looked at other jurisdictions up and down the coast. I think, I know Mr. Mayor, and I think you also, Mr. Galpin, have heard this before, but there is buy-in to think about what is our philosophy going forward. Thank you. With spending of the state tax money. There's no consensus about what to change or how to change it, but there's definitely a buy-in about we need to re-examine this. And as important, I think there was a greater consensus that the staff ought to look at the state tax regulations and pre-decide whether things are qualified or not. So the committee didn't have to decide whether it was qualified. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how to amend the charter so we can do that and then bring that back to the group for their decision and then bring it back to the town council for final approval about modifying the charter so we can look at that. But there was a very good discussion, a long discussion about what's the role of state tax money, where should it stop, who should get it, how do we think about public versus private entities. All of that was, again, a big topic of conversation. So we'll try to do a lot of that offline as we go through the summer and before we get to the next state tax votes. Two of these on here I will talk about. Well, let me just give you some statistics first. So there were 15 applicants. 6 of them were unanimously approved and voted.
15 applicants beyond the towns.
Beyond the town, yeah. 15 beyond the town. 7 were unanimously approved and voted for funding, other than if there was a sponsor involved. Then the sponsor, that's one of our rules, the sponsor doesn't vote for his own project. There were 3 that had only one exception. So let's say there's 6 members present. So 3, there were 5 of 6 votes. There was 1 that was 4 of 6. And then there were 3 that did not get a majority. And the 3 that did not get a majority were the baseball field renovation. That actually only got 1 vote. And then the Heal with Hearts did not get a majority. And the the Angel Oak Preserve did not get a majority. So as we go through discussions about that, that's where the committee is coming from. So the numbers you see were just an arithmetic average of everybody. It didn't reflect whether there was a majority or not. But those 4 that I mentioned, or those 3 that I mentioned, did not get a majority. Again, the baseball field renovation, the Heal with Hearts, and Angel Oak Preserve. And I'll close by saying I think everybody thought all of those were great organizations and, deserving of funding from someplace. Kiowa's SATAX distributions, they didn't feel were the appropriate place. And that's generally not, all of the voting is generally not whether or not it's a deserving opportunity to share. It was more about, is it appropriate for SATAX? There was discussion, is it appropriate for the charitable organization from the town? And that might be a better place for some places. So we're starting to really get a bit around that philosophy of what's appropriate, what should we be doing, and moving more toward codifying that. So I'll stop and see if there's other comments.
Go ahead. Mr. Chairman, I had a struggle a little bit with how we evaluate the recommendations of the SATAX committee in a couple respects, and you've outlined some of the kind of broader, bigger picture issues. Part of the challenge for me is, although I read the SATAX applications when they came in, fortunately because of prior commitments, I could not hear all the presentations and didn't get the benefit of all the backing from the committee. we don't have any of the substantive materials presented herein, and it's just the committee's recommendations without the actual analysis or the substance of the proposals or the applications. My understanding is in the past, this has been a fairly check the box exercise on the part of the Ways and Means Committee and the Council with regard to SATAC's committee recommendations. I appreciate that that has been the case in the past, but while I would certainly give considerable weight to the views of the recommending committee, it is an advisory committee to the council. The council and this committee have generally kind of taken a fresh look at recommendations, whether coming from any of our advisory or staff, so planning commission, environmental committee, or any others, and we generally kind of do a fresh look at all the recommendations. We don't have the material here to be able to do that. We're heavily reliant on the decisions of the SATAC's committee. Again, I give that great weight. I also a little bit perplexed by the allocation criteria formula that was used. It seems to me to bear very little relationship to the substantive merits of any application. And then you noted the issue is there are two fundamentally different kinds of questions. One is, can a proposed allocation be construed to fit within the statutory framework? Right? And then, even if so, as a matter of policy, do we want to provide funding, allocate dollars to that particular application? And that's a separate policy decision that I think the council, in some respects, is in at least as good a position to, or this committee and the council, at least as good a position to make those kinds of judgments as is.
And I think I think we're on the same page with that. I think that the advisory committee makes recommendations, and I think the way we've been talking about things for the past almost a year, that's advice, and then we should take a look at what our views are and weigh what they say is valid input, but then we're not necessarily to rubber stamp this or take these numbers. We can adjust these numbers. I think that's the way I'd like to approach this today for sure.
Well, and certainly I would look at, each one of these, has a different, you look through the initial question, can it be reasonably construed to fit within the statutory criteria? And then, as a policy matters, is something we want to allocate dollars to relative to other priorities. And I don't want to kind of yet go through systematically each one of these. But for example, the Little League baseball field project, however meritorious it might be, that's one where personally, I don't see how it actually comes close to fitting.
I think that every person on the SATAC's committee, advisory or not, with one exception, agrees with you.
Well,
that it just didn't fit. And that was part of I'm kind of getting back to, that was part of the discussion. Should the staff and the chairman pre-evaluate these and say they do or don't apply? And then we have to come up with a policy around.
I guess my point, though, is if we, as the council, SATAC committee concluded it did not, do we reach the same conclusion or not? Does the council, decide whether it fits or not? And if not, if we conclude it does not, there should be no dollars. It's not this kind of formula.
I agree.
And then you can look like Low Country. I don't know enough about that to make an argument as to whether that one fits. That may be more of a policy question, whether it fits. But then the idea of giving $833 out of an $8,000 application, I'm struggling to kind of make sense of that.
So that's exactly the things I talked about, or I inferred when I said we want to go back and have some philosophical approaches and change our charter so that we can take the numbers and the votes and then say, for example, my recommendation would be if they don't have a majority that qualifies, great. If it doesn't qualify, then we would move those out. If it qualifies and they don't have a majority, then they get zero, would be my recommendation. But I've got to get that in the charter and have the town council vote on that. So I think we're of like mind.
Yeah,
So I talk more about this.
I think that's right. I think there needs to be an articulation of whether it meets statutory criteria or not. That ultimately is a legal conclusion. And ultimately is only decided if there is some dispute about that about a court. But you can make informed judgments about that, and ultimately there are a lot of allocations that I suspect are in a gray area that have never been challenged where they go forward. Just for the benefit of Councilmember Spencer, you talked about this to some extent, Say Tax Committee. Just backing up a little bit, this is a very different approach the town has taken this time around. We, as a town, as an institution, encouraged more, say, tax applications than had been the case in the past. I specifically encouraged some organizations to submit, say, tax applications. One of it was certainly, rather than just coming out of our general fund, because I thought it could fit within the say tax criteria, was the Living Shoreline projects to deal with waterfront erosion, particularly, this gets into the policy arena, around the bridge. Since that is a vital, obviously more than vital access point. Councilmember Spencer, both the chairman and I and staff have spent a lot of time looking at a lot of other communities, looking at a lot of guidance, AG opinions, the revenue ruling 9822, and court cases, etc. One thing that's very interesting, it's not dispositive, but certainly interesting of how we might want to look at this, is every other municipality we looked at allocated, other than to municipal related expenditures, allocated a limited amount of money and only to nonprofit organizations. And with regard to those nonprofit organizations, most of those entities, they did it in different ways, applied fairly strict criteria, and there need to be some tourism relationships, some metrics associated with that. But one other thing too that jumps out is the allocations almost always substantially for just general purposes of marketing, but according to marketing that. But part of the reason for all of that is we've been in a very different position with respect to all our accommodations and hospitality related taxes compared to other municipalities. I've used the example of Isle of Palms, which generates a little bit more in the accommodations taxes than does Kiowa Island. So we generate a little bit more than $3 million. I think they're about 3.5, 3.6. A little bit larger allocation thus to the CB. They utilize almost everything for municipal related projects. They allocate only a total of $50,000 out of well more than $2 million that could be distributed in the 65% fund. They only allocate $50,000 in total to outside organizations, and they have a couple of dozen applicants for that. Again, that's just one extreme example. We've just been very, very different in the past. We've allocated only, historically, I think, to 4 or 5 of the same applicants every year. They've all been, I think, for-profit organizations. Again, no other municipality allocates to for-profit entities. However, there is no express prohibition in the statute to doing that. And indeed, there is an attorney general's opinion that reversed itself early in about 30, 40 years ago. Attorney general said should be to nonprofit organizations. A more recent opinion said, no, there's no prohibition in the statute. So we can certainly choose as a policy matter. There's nothing to prescribe, prohibit the allocation for profit organizations. We can then decide as a policy matter, just like any of these others, whether that makes sense to do so. The other big pick,
And I'm not sure we want to do that because I think this is very explicitly. Words. It means whose work is a huge tool strong. So there's a lot of discussion you have to have before we got there. But it is some place where we stand out as being very different from everything else.
You make a very interesting point, though, as this concept of heads and beds and everything. I know I don't like that term at all. But I was actually spending earlier this morning going back on all the various kind of TripAdvisor, various other sites that kind of as a tourist attraction and what attracts people to Kiowa Island. It's the beach. It is golf courses, but there's a lot of references to its natural environment. Bird watching, strand feeding, just overall wildlife, the maritime forest, the nature trails, eco tours, etc. All of those are part of the fabric that makes Kiowa a unique tourist destination. I know some of my friends in the hospitality industry may not appreciate this view, but I don't believe there are very many tourists that come to Kiowa Island and they're making that decision because of a particular villa that they want to stay in or a particular hotel or whatever. They're coming to Kiowa, then they're looking for where they'd like to stay. I would agree that the resort may be an exception to that some people will come. They'll say, I want to come to a coastal community, but I want to come to Kiowa because I want to stay at a 5-star resort, or I want to go to the #1 rated tennis center, or for a big conference.
Or I want to play the ocean course.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the resort is in itself a reason. Now, if the resort were not at the beach, would it get as much? Probably not, but just tennis and golf in itself might be sufficient. A 5-star hotel might be sufficient. So I think the resort I would look at a little bit differently in that regard, because I think it is part of the overall value proposition.
I appreciate on my thankfully. That's some of my thinking as I was looking through the button I just today, trying to consider my thoughts as well. I appreciate the effort of the community. So, I also noticed that there are folks that have background material, but I've seen them move through all, but how do that again? So I'm only seeing 3 pages.
No. When the applications first came in and they were pushed out, you had a link to the applications when they were received. So that's about a month and a half ago. It was in, yeah.
It would help me. I put open the link.
Yes.
Legit.
It's a fair point. Something we want to talk about as a process change is to have an executive summary for not only the SATAX committee, but for the members, so you don't have to read through it. And the way it's organized, have an executive summary and then the presentation. That makes it simpler for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's probably very valuable conversation that help understand that I've been on the 18 albums. But I had similar thinking about the for-profits, that for the benefit of short-term rentals in mind, business, acreage, LS, how does that factor in? I just looked at my plot very transparently. Whatever reason that the code says that DC, I've heard by resubsidizing something that this for-profit business that I'm trying to make folks that.
And those are all very valid. And again, we talk about those, and I have a member of the SATAX committee here with us who is one of the vocal members that want to talk more and more about the philosophy and get more granular on how the money is spent by the for-profit entities to make sure it is to generate tourism and it's not simply to improve their profitability. That's a very, very active, ongoing discussion we're having right now. And it's the danger you have when you go down the path of not restricting it to nonprofits is, okay, where is this money going and how is it Other towns, and this is something, again, we'll talk about, other towns have the requirement of matching funds or 2-to-1 matching funds or 3-1 matching funds, even for events. So that's another thing we're going to talk more and more about that philosophy. How do we allocate this money? Who's appropriate to get the money? What's appropriate for it to be used for? And then how do we allocate in a better way so there's more transparency around the spending and more transparency around our view on, is this really attracting tourism? Is it sort of just a nice thing to have that's great, but it just doesn't necessarily fit for SATEX expenditures? So all these are good questions.
And this is the first time where we've actually had applications that have exceeded the amount of available funding, I think. But that's really only true because of the anomalous, in some respects, $1 million request from the Low Country Land Trust with regard to Angel Oak, which we can talk about. So, yeah, there is some element of proration. I may be helpful to understand kind of how the formula works, because it just literally, if somebody voted for one of the applications, it got some dollars, regardless. Yeah, which is I struggle to kind of understand why that is the appropriate way we should be evaluating these, but I understand that's how we've done it in the past.
That's the only reason it's like that this time, is because it's how we've always done it. That is one of the things that's under the purview of future review. And again, I'll lay my cards on the table. If one person votes for it and 6 don't vote for it, we don't prorate it, because that person could vote $1 million for Angel Oak, and then it's 1/7. We need to have a majority of the committee recommend it, and then take a vote on how much do we spend. So that's some of the process.
Yeah, they should make a recommendation. We may conclude, either Ways and Means Committee or Council, that we simply fundamentally disagree with the recommendation of the committee. They may vote to fund 0 for a particular application. The council could turn around and say, no, we think this application should be fully funded. That's the council's prerogative.
You get the debt. That's not letting go, but then they sell that $2 million for. However, from the various components of that application that the committee did the thing was at project. That's $40,000.
No, it was just this kind of mechanical application of this. That why I think it ended up with $43,000.
Right. You notice, and also to members voted to find that sentence with. Or it meant about the voting out, but it meant $43,000.
And by the way, this is a classic example. The Low Country Land Trust, the Angel Oak project. We don't kind of need to make any decision with regard to that now, but the reason I encourage them to apply is because my view was it clearly fits within the criteria, the statutory criteria. It is a major tourist attraction in the area. Families that stay here go to Angel Oak. It's iconic for the Low Country. But having said that, I appreciate that the chairman, he and I discussed this, has a different policy perspective as to, even if it were permitted, is this a little too far up the river or up the road? Me, I don't have an issue. The statute clearly says you can be in other part of the state, other part of the county, another county, etc. That is not a statutory limitation. That is a policy decision. For me, 8 miles, and in fact, it's part of kind of the overall Kiowa Sea Island fabric, was fine. But I would note a separate policy issue, which, number one, were anticipated that they would seek $1 million. Number two, I would certainly, I could have, even if I had been on the committee or now as a member of this committee or council, could say, well, I would be happy to consider having the town help support this very important kind of regional tourist attraction. But first, you should have applied for and received some money from the city and the county before going to Kiowa Island first. which to me would be kind of where I might come out on as a policy.
Yeah, I understand that thinking and makes sense to me. I'm glad you encouraged them to apply, by the way. In my mind, it didn't seem out of bounds geographically because the county's trying to establish a commercial corridor up there. So in theory, Keogh visitors are going up there for dinner and stuff like that. So it can be part of, the ecosystem that we're part of.
And let me give you my thinking on the other side. I'm always the bad guy, right? The money guy's always the bad guy. And I accept
been
that
my
role,
experience.
no problem. But so it's a little bit like the marsh. Okay, so how far is too far? So if Angel Oak is something we would fund, does that mean that the Charleston Tea Plantation, which is the biggest tourist draw, just a little bit further, should that apply for funding? It's a for-profit entity that's meets here. Then if you go a little bit further, should the Charleston River Dogs? A lot of people come to see Charleston River Dogs. They stay on Kiowa. Kiowa, clearly tourists can go there as something to do. So I tried to get in my mind, is this something to do for people that come to Kiowa, or is this something that attracts people to Kiowa that they do? And to me, those are two distinctly different things. And then, where do you draw the line? I mean, people might come to see the Charleston River Dogs and stay in Kiowa, but it's so far that linkage, it's going to be very tough for somebody to convince me that's why they are staying at Kiowa and not staying downtown Charleston.
When I go see the River Dogs, I
So they're here to play the ocean course and see the Charleston River Dogs. So that, in math, you always got to iterate. You take the very extreme and then you work backwards to kind of find out where the sensitivity is. And that's my approach is, and again, let me just say, Angel Oak, the Charleston Tea Plantation, River Dogs, all great organizations, and I think we should encourage people to do them. But whether they really attract folks here, and that allows him to spend, allows us to spend.
You and I have had this back and forth, and now we're having a little bit more publicly. And this is one of those kind of philosophical differences. The statute doesn't require that the expenditure goes something that attracts tourists. It also allows for something that provides for tourists or facilitates tourism. So the way I look at it is, what are the reasons that families come to? Because this is a big family destination, come to Kiowa Island and stay in Kiowa Island as opposed to other areas. And it's not golf, quite frankly, for families necessarily. It's the beach, and then it's all the other activities, kayaking, leisure trails, things they can do. I think part of the reason people come to Kiowa Island as opposed to many other coastal destinations because of Charleston. Now, does that mean we're necessarily going to, one reason we're here, but does that mean we're going to fund something in Charleston, to the River Dogs, or Gilliard, or Gibbs, or anything else? I think you're absolutely right. There's some balancing, line drawing, kind of judgment there. Where you do, I don't know. I do think that Angel Oak is one of those, just personally speaking, that is one of those things that families, when they come here, staying on Kiowa Island, a family probably goes up to Angel Oak, at least during a period of time. They attract 400,000 visitors, Angel Oak does. So anyway, we don't need to belabor that, but that's this challenge of this new approach that we're taking to all of this.
And I would say, if I can, to close out the discussion, why this is an important discussion and philosophically we need to come to a conclusion is this, because going forward, we're going to be allocating money. Not everybody's going to be fully funded. So if you allocate something to Charleston Tea Plantation and somebody locally only gets a 85 or 75 or 65%, we now have to start evaluating that decision. Do we want to allocate something locally to be able to give some money here and encourage that? Or do we want to fully fund what's local? So we're thinking about limited resources now where we haven't had to do that in the past. And it makes this exercise of philosophy that much more important. Okay. With that, do we want to go down the list and talk about any of these, or?
Kind of think it might be premature, to be honest, based off the last conversation. I don't know. Are we?
Well, let's see, at some point we can defer consideration until the next meeting and get additional information. But that's up to you, that Ways and Means may simply not be making a recommendation to town council. Obviously, we have to do so at some point.
We do. There's obviously a timeline, or at least I would think there'd be, but
I think out of deference to Mr. Spence, or since this is your first one, I wouldn't be opposed to deferring it the next time.
Well, and we should have a little bit of this same kind of conversation with council members. That two of our fellow council members are the ones that benefited from even this conversation. Probably need to understand that, because there are, again, there's a couple here that, at least one that I would say, it simply doesn't meet the criteria. I would say no matter how beneficial, I'd carve it out. I want to better understand some of the points that Ms. Wyndham was making with regard to the Living Shoreline project. And I could certainly, by the way, I would note for the record that traditionally most other municipalities, when they allocate, do on a reimbursement basis, not funding in advance. Doesn't mean we.
But house and stuff. Yeah. I think, well, you're always supposed to do.
Okay, but I mean, you're committing to the full project up front, which we can do, even though it may be spent over a period of time. I certainly think, I believe, in regard to the Conservancy's project, that there was some element of the fact that this would be a kind of a 2-year, multi-year.
That's what I was just going to say.
Multi-year project. A separate policy question is, I think it's a valid policy question, does the town want to support this project as a town? And then the question is, what monies might be allocable out of the state tax fund?
Yep.
And one can certainly say, as a policy matter, the stuff around where we have tourist activity in the Kiowa River, or as erosion impacts the shoreline or the bridge underpinnings, et cetera, that seems like a natural hit for state tax. To your point, a mile up the river might be really worthwhile. I don't know if it quite
Meets the spirit. Yeah, it doesn't.
State tax doesn't limit that, but we could say we want to support that. We could consider doing that out of another funding source or not. Or we could require the Conservancy or any other organization to, say you've got to provide some additional other funding to what the town is providing. The ones that are the most challenging for me are some of the, I would say the Acres Ellis, Andel Inn, ESPM, and the general Freshfields, non-specific event related stuff. And particularly given the fact that they were almost all fully funded relative to some other things. So those are...
I'm sorry, give me that again, please, sir.
The ones for some of the reasons we discussed, that particularly at the level their percentage are funded, are the Acres Ellis, the Andel Inn, ESPM, and the general tourism and marketing for Freshfields Village, as opposed to
Events. Yeah.
Events. There's no question that Garden and Gun actually is. They advertise that nationally. People do come to the Garden and Gun events kind of wherever. Just like the events for Kia and Kiowa Island events, the marathon is a big draw. It brings a lot of people to Kiowa Island, not only because the people participating race, their family members and others. So, again, people don't come to Kiowa Island to stay in a particular rental property. Come to Kiowa Island for a lot of other reasons, and then they're looking for, where can I stay like that?
And let me just add, Mr. Spencer, there was a lot of discussion in things like Garden and Gun and Marathon that they did it in off-season times where there was vacancy and you could attract more tourism and it was more measurable than if you had a marathon on the 4th of July. But if we're full capacity, what does this do? So there was a lot of these events were trying to focus on those shoulder seasons where it would be back. And that entered into the kind of the decision.
And part of the conversation we need to have the council member, and I know this is not necessarily a popular view from the standpoint of those in the hospitality and accommodations industry, is what I posed the question at the outset was a little back and forth between I and the president of the resort, as we as a policymakers are in the position of having to make judgments about things like whether we have the adequate infrastructure, roads, amenities, etc., to support a never-ending increase in tourism. Or is there kind of a natural limit to the amount of tourism we can reasonably accommodate on the island, particularly during peak seasons, and put inside the shoulder seasons a little bit? And then if that were the case, should we shift to strategies that would be designed to enhance the value proposition of visitor experience so the average daily rate or the spend per tourist goes up rather than increasing the number of tourists? That's something as policymakers is part of what we have to think through. I understand that that's not necessarily the specific interest of those in the accommodation hospitality industry, and I appreciate that.
So my thinking is, and I can make a motion if we're at that point, is that we defer this to add more background that we've been discussing for the last 45 minutes to the packages. And I'm not talking about blocking somebody in their office for the next month and, excruciating detail, but I think we need more decisionable perspective on why the recommendations and advice were the way they were. I think by design, council members aren't necessarily expected to attend every meeting. And trying to recall an email that I might have gotten a long time ago as I'm going through a council package, and I think the package needs to be complete so that I'm not having to remember that and go looking for that. So I think that we should.
So I will, if we want to go this direction, I will agree to work with Dorado, and I'll do most of the work in providing an executive summary for each one of these. And we can delay this for a month if you want to do that.
What I would
do it.
What I would encourage that time was we invite our fellow council members, sure, we might invite all council members to the next Ways and Means
And supply them with the same summary as well. Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I appreciate it if we could do that.
So procedurally, we have a motion and he wants to make a second motion. Should we vote on the first motion and deny it?
No, I think you can simply, Chairman, move to defer table the pending.
Okay, I'm going to move that we defer the current pending motion for approval of this and entertain another motion to defer for a month. And
I think that is sufficient.
okay,
Yeah, second.
Yeah.
that's it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the motion has been tabled. And then over the next month, I, with a little bit of Dorado's assistance, will provide executive summaries for all of these projects.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Busted from that. We have something else to do today?
Got several items, as a matter of fact. 3 of them should be relatively routine.
Yeah.
We'll just go through the list. The next new business is to review and recommend to the town council the proposal for on-call engineer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Ways and Means Committee. The town relies pretty heavily on third-party vendors for certain services that are not to be able to be performed by town staff, and engineering services are among those list of services. We contract out engineers for projects including, but not limited to, civil, structural, traffic, and environmental projects. Currently, our process is town staff will recognize the scope of work in a project that we want to pursue. We'll put together an RFP, put that RFP out to solicit bids, get those back, review the bids, and then put together a selection team to discuss and then make a recommendation to the Ways and Means Committee and then ultimately to Town Council. It's a pretty lengthy process, and it can really impact the timeline for projects that we want to get done. The intent of this new process for on-call engineering services is to shorten that timeline. So if there's projects that pop up that we would like to kind of get done rather quickly, this is going to be really helpful for us to achieve that. So having on-call contracts means that we won't have to go through that full process as I just described. So town staff released an RFQ to solicit proposals from any qualified engineering firms. It was posted publicly on public platforms, and we also sent this RFQ to a lot of firms that we've worked with in the past. We received 14 proposals from engineering firms, and we put together a review team to look over all of these proposals. We reviewed them individually, then met as a group to discuss what we thought about each one of these firms, and we ultimately narrowed that list down to 6 firms. And the 6 firms that we are going to be recommending today, they transcend a wide range of disciplines of engineering, kind of from general engineering services to traffic engineering to environmental engineering. So we feel like this list is inclusive of everything that we would need from an engineering standpoint. The 6 firms that we're recommending to you all today are Alliance Consulting Engineers, Infrastructure Consulting and Engineering, Kimley Horn, McSweeney Engineers, Weston Sampson, and Woolpert. The review team, again, we selected these because they cover the different disciplines of engineering that we've needed in the past. So what we are recommending today is that the Ways and Means Committee will recommend these 6 firms to the town council for negotiation into contracts. This isn't to enter into any contract. This will be the opportunity for the town council or the mayor to enter into contract negotiations with these firms, any or all of these firms. And if this is approved, there will be no change to financial data because this is just going to be for negotiations. So if you all have any questions about the process or the firms or the reviews that we went through, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
So do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
So that's a motion to approve the recommendation for the side listing of wood.
So to need to authorize me to enter into contract.
Recommend to council. Yeah.
Recommend to council that the budget grant authority to enter into contract negotiations with the safer.
I've got just I think one question. I think this is a good initiative. I've been aware of this, and I think it's a best practice that we should adopt it as the town. I was trying to recall how the procurement policy works once you enter negotiations and have awarded what I think of as IDIQs, indefinite delivery, definite quantity, kind of task order based kind of contracts. And you're trying to preclude a protracted RFP by RFP process. Does this then fall into the administrative process with the procurement policy we recently reviewed that most of these likely would be approved at the mayor level? Is that kind of how this works?
So,
And is there a limit to the dollar?
what I would anticipate is we would still divide the world kind of between like ongoing consulting services, charge hourly. You please come with us to, come out, spend 2 hours to grade Beachwalker Drive, whether we need to replace it or whether it's failing or something like that. Or you guys have any thoughts about how to handle the area outside Mingle Point? In the past, it's always been project or task order based. When it's not, we're just trying to get your expert advice and counsel, like we do with legal on something. What I would anticipate is there would still be then task orders, specific projects or task orders for many of the things that we would undertake, in which case, depending on the dollar amount, those would be subject to our new requisition policy. So for something that was over $20,000, it would be coming back to council. Under that, there would be different approval processes, but it would not have to come back to council. So
That's helpful. And I think that understanding, and I know we talked through that a couple months ago, so rivers particulars, but I think that's helpful and helps expedite the order of government and business. With your one comment about just being able to pick up the phone and get an hour's to two's worth. So would the intention be that Brian or Jim or Dorota or somebody else, that's available, that they don't need to go get a special approval, that they, to pick up the phone and say, hey, come to this meeting, I need your help.
I mean, just like we do with legal or sometimes other consultants right now, there are, we reach out to, they don't separately charge us, I don't think, for like coastal sciences and engineering. Generally, these guys probably would. That's on an hourly basis, depending if it's just picking up the phone and having a quick conversation and they're a retainer and they're looking to hopefully get additional project-related work, maybe not.
But then we use the best judgment of whoever's engaging them as to here's the best fit to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to have essentially a budget for engineering consulting services. We do have a budget line item, so we've got to be mindful of that. We're kind of potentially could blow through that with legal, depending on what happens, and then you have to come in and get an amendment to the budget at some point in time. It'll be the same type of thing.
And if I recall correctly, tell me if I'm misrecalled, right? Like the assessment of the bridge life expectancy and recommended actions to extend the life of the bridge, that would be done by one of these awardees, probably, that you would then subsequently work their financial.
Well, in this case, we've already had McSweeney as one of the firms was selected by the review committee. They have been our engineer rather than having, if we could simply, based on this, not have to go out with a separate new RFP in order to say we want somebody to look at the bridge every 2 to 3 years or something like that. We could simply say, Sweeney, you're pre-qualified to do that. Kind of give us a project price, and we can decide to go one of the other engineering firms say on this if we don't like what their terms are.
I think this is a good initiative.
And committee member Spencer, the only request that I would add is that while we have these potential 6 firms, if you all make a recommendation and council approve it, like any of our other contracts, example, you chair the infrastructure and public works committee. So if your group is interested, we would just ask that we may not have committee members just calling because we want to make sure that we maintain. But if there's something you want to work on or any other committee members, because I think mainly these groups will probably work through Brian, Michael, maybe the mayor and myself, but we try to be very mindful of staff just calling them up just because we don't want to run the cost up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the mayor and I have had those conversations at the onset. And I've deferred to John and Brian and others when it comes to that.
Like, I think your committee may have a lot of this, and since Brian is on there, I think it'll be clearly okay. You guys say, hey, we want whomever to come out, and it just funnels through Brian.
Each of our committees, I mean, the disciplines, as Brian noted, these have a wide variety of the stormwater management, environmental services, traffic management, public safety, et cetera. So each of our standing committees, one could see tapping into potentially one or more of these firms with regard to their.
This is helpful. We've been waiting for this. We're going to be talking about some of these 48 hours.
Mr. Gottschalk, could you talk just a minute about the 6 firms and whether they're specialty firms or they're general engineering firms and what their capabilities are, just in summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So in very, very short summary, Alliance Consulting Engineers and Infrastructure Consulting Engineering, we chose those as our general engineering firms. They've got they cover all disciplines, which can be really good. And they came with a lot of we had an engineer from Kika that was on the review team, and he's got experience with both of those and spoke very highly of both of those firms. So we felt comfortable selecting them. Kimley Horn, their discipline is traffic. That's what we've kind of used them for. So we would certainly be calling on them for traffic engineering. As the mayor mentioned, McSweeney Engineers, they're kind of environmental with some structural, right? They've done our bridge inspections. So, and they also have helped me do some inspections on the Gabion Wall along the Kiowa River. So they're kind of in that environmental. And then same thing with Weston Sampson and Wolpert. Those guys, we've worked with Weston Sampson on a couple different projects. So they've got that kind of environmental base, and then along with Wolpert as well too. Wolpert is an engineer that we've worked with to do the river station, the tide station at the Kiowa River Bridge. So those are in short the disciplines that they've covered.
Would you say that McSweeney, Weston and Sampson, and Wolford are interchangeable, or is one more expansive in their expertise than another?
I certainly think that they do overlap in some, depending on the project, on what it was. I think that we would reach out to a couple, if not all three of them, to get pricing on the same project. But there certainly could be some areas that we would specifically reach out to one or the other.
And part of it just reach out to various ones to see kind of what they're at any given time, what they're out. We would negotiate hourly rate, and then kind of go back to them availability. What I can tell you is I was profoundly disappointed in one of the firms that's on this list where we had a relationship and we were going to have a committee here and said, like to come, could you just come and, present your thoughts at committee hearing? And they wanted $10,000. I would like to have been able to simply go to somebody else and say, how about you? My guess is somebody else would have been more than willing to do that. So, but even like Kimley Horn in Western San, Kimley Horn is a big national. They do everything. But they may or may not be the best on any one area, or they may not be the most cost effective. They may not have the availability. So let's give ability just kind of reach out to everybody.
So the reason I'm asking this question is I have experience with one of the firms, and I think at this point I'm not going to name it. I shared the experience with somebody from the committee who called me, asked that I've experienced, and I was very disappointed in a couple areas. One is just the engineering itself that I needed it felt like it was, there's a phrase that Bruce Spiker used. It's like they just pulled it out of the book and just sent me the forms. And then they later said they needed to come out and take pictures, and they were going to bill me for the pictures. And the pictures weren't of my property, and they were the same pictures that were in a previous proposal. And then their expenses, their rates were just really high. And so I was and am very frustrated with this one engineering firm. I don't know how to express that to the council here, but it was distressing that it was really a lack of customization. And I went back, being an engineer, and said, why do you have this structure built like this? There's no pressure from here or there. Can you downsize this and reduce the cost? Oh, yeah, we can do that. Well, why didn't you do it the first time? Why did you maximize the structure when it didn't need to be maximized? It was built for a hurricane when you're only expecting a little storm. So anyway, I was frustrated by one of this here. So I'm just thinking about how do I share this?
What I can assure you, at least, is I'm dealing with them, and at least in their initial negotiations, just like we did with our town attorney, as well as our outside legal advisor for development agreements. Played the word for municipality card, and you got to have lower rates than and yes, I have no issue just picking up the phone. The first one we're not getting good response from, pick up the phone and call the next one. That's what this allows us to do. But yes, I've been a little frustrated. I'm not. You spent time dealing with engineers. You have an engineering background. Obviously, council member does a lot more than I do. You do as well. My little interaction, I've been a little frustrated about their bottom line focus to a fare-thee well, and just kind of unwilling to just pick up the phone and, have a 20-minute conversation. Fine, if you want to charge me for 20 minutes, do it, but don't say you have to get a task order for $10,000 to do.
Mr. Chairman, we're aware that
We'll take
that
this offline.
conversation came up and we discussed it in committee. Mr. Berner informed us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, what really was disappointing most was the engineering part of it. That's what really started it. Was the engineering it was like just pulled out of whatever they did last time, and not site specific for me. And I have unique conditions, and so
And I suspect it's like the law firms or accountants or any number of other professional disciplines. There are some that are better than others, and some are offer more insight, more willing to put in time and effort. Others just kind of go through the motions and check the box.
okay. So buyer beware, Mr. Mayor. Any further discussion?
Okay, Clancy.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Then
The next order of business is, in short, to recommend and approve the purchase of a new Toyota Tacoma as a replacement vehicle for wildlife department. You want to talk about that also?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So as you all know, the town does provide fleet vehicles to staff that has responsibilities that takes them on the island.
So just to press pause on that.
Yes, sir.
The one issue we're working through is your statement that town provides vehicles for employees. It should be town provides the vehicles for departments. An exception to that,
Okay.
but
So reword.
but this is an ongoing conversation.
Rewood. I will start over. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town of Kiowa Island provides vehicles for departments whose responsibilities take them out into the field onto the island on a regular basis or irregular basis. The wildlife department has 2 vehicles in their department right now. And they're seeking to replace one of those vehicles, the older vehicle, due to we typically try to get on a cycle of cycling the fleet vehicles out, and also the existing condition of the truck. It was a little less than a month ago. It was in for some routine maintenance, and it was made aware that there was an issue with the truck that was going to be a pretty costly repair, and it was recommended by the mechanic that we try to cycle it out, just given the nature of the repair and the cost that it was going to be. So we worked as fast as we could on a really tight timeline to try to get this on the agenda for this month, given that this is the last month of this year's current budget. We posted an RFP to solicit quotes for a new Toyota Tacoma to have the same specs as the existing Toyota Tacoma. We posted it publicly and we sent it to some local dealerships, and unfortunately, we didn't have that many responses for one reason or another. Maybe it was the quick turnaround time, or just the lack of interest in providing quotes for us. But we did get 2 bids for a new Tacoma. One bid was from American Vet Works, which was the amount of $56,389. And another bid was from Finley Logistics, LLC for $62,992. American Vet Works has, while they are a cheaper proposal, they have a 3 to 6 month delivery time. And that's because they're based in, or some of the reason is because they're based in New York. So that would be not an ideal time to wait for a truck. And then Finley Logistics they would be able to deliver us a truck this month if we were to go with them. So what town staff is requesting that the Ways and Means recommend to town council, approving the quote from Finley Logistics and the amount stated. The financial data, the current budget has $35,000 for a new town vehicle. We've gotten an offer through email from a dealer for $27,000 for the old truck. So they have offered to pay $27,000 for the truck that we're trying to cycle out. So that means the $35,000 plus the $27,000, we would be the net cost for the new vehicle would be $992.00, and that would come from the general fund. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Do I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that we approve the staff recommendations for recommend the vehicle purchase to council.
Second. Discussion?
I just have one question. I understand the urgency. You got a transmission, well, so you got to move on this. Mine's more towards the requirement. I know we've been using a Tacoma or similar. Is that what is best suited to what wildlife needs, or would another type of vehicle be more appropriate for that?
It's a good question. So just kind of some rationale behind the fleet of Toyotas. We are fortunate enough to have a really good relationship with the community association that also has a fleet of Toyotas, and we typically can take our vehicles over to them to work on. Their mechanic is a master Toyota mechanic, so he is strictly Toyotas. I don't know how involved he would get with another vehicle or another brand vehicle. So it's just really helpful to be able to pop over on the island for a maintenance issue or a routine routine maintenance on a vehicle, instead of having to take two people and potentially a full day or multiple days to go out to West Ashley, North Charleston, wherever to have maintenance performed on one of the vehicles.
Does Kika charge us for that service?
I'm sorry?
Does Kika bill us for that service?
Yes, they do. So the second part of that question, is that suited for them? Short answer is yes. They do like the Tacoma. It's historically, it's a really, really great all-terrain kind of off-road vehicle. It's compact enough for them to get on bike paths and, in undeveloped areas, but still has the capabilities that they need with the bed size and full cab and everything like that. So they really do prefer that Tacoma.
So I think I'm perplexed that none of the Toyota dealers locally would want to sell us a truck.
So therein lies the primary app with this. My mind, this is not the type of thing that lends itself to going out to a bid. I have no idea who or what Finley Logistics is, but they're not a dealership. So this is a little conversation back and forth I had with Brian. I'm just right now looking at two local dealerships. There are available trucks, right, that meet all the specifications with one, except one. And the question is, and they're all well less than $50,000. So but these are all 5-foot beds rather than 6-foot, the ones that are readily available. Whether that extra foot is, I suspect, would be utilized, but whether it's worth
Critical or not, yep.
$15,000 or not, there is an aftermarket. I think you do a lift, but that's not going to cost that much as well. So I think we went through the ordinary kind of the process, but what our revised ordinance certainly allows is just going out and doing kind of internet searches on prices. And then I would be more comfortable simply authorizing not to exceed this amount, but not necessarily purchasing the vehicle from Finley Logistics, but a vehicle that meets the key criteria. If you can get it at substantially less, then we should do so. Now, the question is going to be, and I don't know, if we really need a 6-foot bed and there's none around here, you can look at Columbia, you could look at, Somerville, whether those meet the criteria. The aftermarket lift, I think that can be done for a lot less cost. You did say the Finley Logistics bid includes all packs, so that makes up a significant amount of that difference. But this just appears to me to be somebody that's saying, I'll bid, and somebody takes it, I make a lot more money. How can they make, what justifies on a kind of a vehicles available anyway, 6,000 more than another. They're just make a lot more money off it.
Yeah, and I agree with that position a lot. It's always kind of difficult to follow the procurement process as we historically have done with purchasing a vehicle, while still being able to try to negotiate down, right? Because you solicit bids and then you get the bids back, and you can't try to negotiate what they've sent into us, because that would kind of be unfair to any other bidder. So if you all were comfortable in recommending not to exceed price, I think that it would give us a little bit more time that we didn't have in preparation for today to find something. I would certainly imagine less than $63,000.
The question is that if you do the invitation to bid, the sealed bids, that's you kind of lock yourself into that process. But our procurement policy doesn't require us to go down that route. And this is the perfect kind of acquisition where there's a lot of market information out there where we can use to justify getting the price that we ultimately pay. And all the market information would suggest that a vehicle exactly like the one requested, in fact, in the RFP itself, it doesn't say anything about the lift. I don't think. Dealer installed lift. You're right, it does. But again, without the dealer installed lift, I don't know how big a deal the 6 foot is versus 5 foot. I haven't looked around extensively for whether some of these are 6 foot, but there are several that meet the all-weather floor mats, 17-inch all-terrain, same model, black, everything else, weather, mats, everything, at least $15,000 less.
I think that's a great observation. I think I agree with that. I do have one question though. You mean you think of who puts the wildlife sticker or whatever that is decal on the side? How does that?
We get those from. We've typically used a company called Cinerama in the past to make those decals, and we can either have them come out and do it, or we just put them on ourselves if we've got a careful hand.
So there will be a small extra expense to do that. That's not included.
Oh yeah, like $100, couple $100. Yeah,
wow.
Not much. It's not very expensive.
Maybe I'll.
If it's a brand new truck, 0 mileage or 10 miles load, does a 2024 work, or why 2025?
No, there's no real rhyme or reason other than we've typically tried to get a newer truck to capitalize on the warranty that may be involved with that truck, and it just
Saying warranty on 2024 could save another 10 grand. Is that probably met all the other specifications?
Not to speak for Jim, but I don't think that would be an issue.
Yeah, this is one where I'm fine if we're having mechanical, issues, and recommend that we swap out a truck and get a fair amount for it. I have a problem for the Delta. I mean, the Delta should be a lot less than what's in here. We're not adding to the vehicle fleet or replacing one. They get a lot of hard use in this. Stephanie has suggested that council or staff probably want to go into one of those vehicles.
Who was the dealer that offered to buy the used truck?
It's in my email. It was one of the local Hendricks that offered to buy it. I don't know if it was Hendrick Toyota or Chevy, but it was one of the Hendrick dealers.
I would think if you went up to Hendricks Toyota with that, said, "What are you doing a trade for me?" You get a good deal.
Certainly.
You could recommend it to mayor and empower him to buy the truck physically. I think it's a good idea personally.
Sure, absolutely. With the spec sheets right in front of you, so we know what we're looking for.
I'd like a picture of that. I would go with him just to take the picture.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a motion in front of us. Is there an amendment to the motion? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would recommend to right, how to phrase this. Certainly would recommend to council the approval to purchase a new, but whether it's 24 or 25, Toyota Tacoma with the specifications are close there too, at a price not to exceed. I would not support setting this cake. Yeah, I don't. But I don't know what are taxes and title on what's percentage here? It's up kind.
6.
Same applied things.
Ready?
It's a alignment. None.
Oh,
Cars.
poppy.
I'll let you know tomorrow when I go to the.
So that the title and taxes don't make up very much of.
Not much of a gap.
I would think that based on what I'm saying, where Fred Anderson is over, suggesting, let's see, a list that's the sticker price is 47 or so. That's a little bit more than Hendrix, or 48, but they say call for, so it's something less.
And there's the trade-in value.
What's that?
And there's the trade-in value.
So, well, this is the acquisition price. We'll assume that still holds for the trade.
Limit it to 48. So
I would say 50 because I don't know if I don't know what the dealer lift is, but that's the only.
That sounds
Probably in the $3,000 range for a 2-inch factory installed suspension lift.
50. And then if it's 51, then you can alter that.
I would be fine to say not to exceed with title tax and everything 52,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion so amended for it not to exceed $52,000. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all.
I'll
be back up here in just a minute.
So you guys next week will go start hammering out, look the ones here, if you look, or Somerville, or
This patch you got more. What did you say last one?
Oh, the last.
At the end.
Oh, so wow. Strictly just looking.
okay.
Next order of business is to review and recommend to town council for approval of proposal for Maudlin and Jenkins for internal controls assessment.
Yes, thank you. So the town undergoes an annual financial audit as it's required by the state law. And every 5 years we solicit new auditors and have those audits done in the fall. And they've been, we're getting clean opinions every year. However, we want to add additional or take additional step to further strengthen our financial controls and internal controls. And there was a discussion with our current auditor that he recommended a group that is part of the Maudlin Jenkins. They concentrate on, it's a governmental advisory group, and that's the kind of engagements that they work with. We invited them to attend our audit committee last month to talk a little more in detail what they can offer and if they could meet our goals or expectations. And here today you have the proposal that they prepared to do. Pretty much it's like it's an assessment. It's going to be a 16 to, based on this proposal, 16 to 18 weeks process of looking at our financial documents, testing, identifying any gaps, pretty much
going through whatever this assignment. They just proposing a couple of items that they're gonna do, but we can of course add to it or modify if we want to do anything extra. And we have a placeholder in current in a budget for it, and the proposal is going to be $35,000 as what they're recommending right now. There was a discussion with the audit committee that we may want to do it later, take it to looking maybe in some HR policies or cyber risk and different items. So there will be additional cost to it. So this is just the internal control assessment and of $35,000. And that's the staff recommendation to recommend it to town council to approve it. And we're gonna discuss it in more details at the audit committee in June. We have a meeting June 7th, and I will propose that July. I'm sorry. Yes, and we want to start it. I was suggesting that we're going to do it together with the financial audit starting in mid-August, just to make it easier and stuff.
Chairman, I recommend that the Ways and Means Committee, or I move that the Ways and Means Committee recommend to council approval of the internal.
Second. Discussion? So maybe I'll start just a couple things. We talked at length among ourselves, and then we had some advice from M&J. There are significant efficiencies for having the same broad firm do both the financial audit and the internal controls audit. A lot of the pieces in the financial controls are either precursors or postcursors, if that's a word, to the internal controls and financials. They're definitely interrelated. So there's tremendous efficiencies. There's probably cost efficiencies as well, because they're talking to the same folks internally in M&J. Also, M&J, we think, has a distinct advantage in doing this, so we're not necessarily wanting to go out for a competitive bid situation. Our team looked at it, and they had some specific recommendations to enhance the audit. I think we're going to put those in place, but it's looking at kind of accounting policies and procedures, and then other policies and procedures not limited to anything we name specifically. We also thought that there was an importance around the timing, so linking these two audits so that we close at year end definitely makes some sense, and so we wanted to do that as well. M&J has a distinct capability to do this, so we were happy with the capability that they presented. And we're thinking of this as audit is kind of a loose term. This is really, it's an assessment of our current status. And some of the things would come out like an audit, but it's really an assessment and a gaps determination to start. And we're going to do it small. We're not doing everything that we need to do as outlined in our charter. We'll get this done, the 2 or 3 touchstones we want to focus on. And then if we're happy, then we'll extend it, as Dorada mentioned, to kind of broader things we've got listed in our charter. So we want to do a stepwise fashion with this and with M&J to get comfortable, assess our gaps, fix those, and then take the next step on up here is where we want to.
Chairman, appreciate very much yours and Dorada's and the audit committee's leadership on this issue. I think this is a critically important step for us to take. Would note that it's typically not something that needs to be done every year. We do, maybe every 5 years or something. So this is not like a required annual audit. I do have a question. Now I'm a little bit confused about you kind of backtrack from reference to this as being an audit of internal control rather than just an assessment. Interested in, I had thought we were going to be getting an internal controls audit, whereas the firm is putting its marker down that's saying it has tested and is opining to the effectiveness of internal control. So you actually do have an audit opinion regarding internal control. That's what I you could obtain in the public sector previously. That is not this.
That is this, but it's the first one. It's not like you're auditing something that's been in place and it's been tested in the past. This is the first test we're doing. So I want you to have the understanding that we're going to have an audit, but we're also going to identify gaps. So that's kind of an audit and assessment or gap determination at the same time.
So it's more than just pass fail. It's recommendations and advice as well. That's good. I think this is a great initiative too, and thanks for driving this. I'm confident with those involved. The answer to this question is yes, but I'm going to ask it anyhow because I know that there's a tendency to only read the signature block sometimes. The 3 pages of terms and conditions at the end, those are all okay as well. And then there's the verbiage up front. They're not.
They have their identification in there, but if it's approved, we'll either work with using our own contract, or we'll have to have them remove the identification because we cannot.
Okay, so the answer is no. So there's going to be some legal work. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I had the same question and about something else in our list too, that we're going to use our contracts going forward.
We have our contracts going forward, and that's what we like to use. So even though they have theirs, we can essentially work and turn some of theirs into our own contract. We'll be doing that.
Yeah. And it's the two things that keep coming up regularly are indemnification and governing law. And all vendor relationships or service provider relationships with the town need to be, we don't provide indemnification. The appropriate, it's the other way around. And governing law will be that of South Carolina, not.
Okay, any other questions?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's approved. Next order of business.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question while I forgot to look it up? This next 3 of these seem to be tied together.
And I think we can consider these collectively.
I was hoping, so we understand each pillar.
Good. So what we're deciding is make a recommendation to town council for the approval of the amendments to the contract with Phillips and Jordan for debris removal. For recommendation, contract with Southern Disaster for debris removal, and recommendation for approval of amendment to contract with Tetra Tech for debris monitoring.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Ryan, you want to explain to us what we're listening to here?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the event that we have a disaster, a large debris generating disaster that's going to end up being federally declared, we have the opportunity through FEMA to get reimbursement. To get that reimbursement, we have to follow a pretty strict set of guidelines that FEMA has to ensure that we can capitalize on any monies that might be available to give us back for cleanup efforts. For this purpose, we have to have contracts that were properly procured for debris management, which are the Phillips and Jordan contract and the Southern Disaster Recovery contract. And we also have to have a contract with a debris monitoring firm, and that's Tetra Tech does the debris monitoring. So the debris management is the company that will come in and physically pick up and move the debris over to a pre-authorized debris staging area. And the debris monitoring firm is they're basically a fact checker to make sure that that all loads are being properly reported and all the quantities are correct for when we submit any paperwork back to FEMA. So that's why it's important for us to have those 2 contracts. So again, we've got two contracts for debris management or removal, which are Phillips and Jordan and Southern Disaster Recovery. And the reason we have 2, we used to just have 1, but it was a couple years ago when I was at the hurricane conference in Florida, just talking with some people, and in the class that I was in, it was highly recommended. We were the only municipality there that only had 1 contractor. So then we decided the next time that went up for bid, we were going to select multiple firms. So we've had Phillips and Jordan as one of our contractors for 15 years, I think, at this point. And then we entered into a contract with Southern Disaster Recovery back in 2022. So they've been with us for the past 3 years. Both of those contracts are on a 3-year term plus the option for extensions, which is what we're talking about today, as executing their 1-year extension. And similarly with Tetra Tech, we've entered into a 3-year contract with them and are seeking to execute their 1-year extension as well.
I've often wondered what happens in a disaster, having been through a few, but I've not seen the contractual level of what happens when somebody's got a contract with a lot of cut governments and organizations, and then they have to execute. And they hit saturation quickly, just like the utility companies that bring in augmentation.
Yeah, so I'll be brief about kind of how that works. We go through this procurement process, which is required by FEMA to select these contractors. They basically lock in rates that FEMA says that we're okay with those rates. Those are market rates for per cubic yard for debris. So yes, they don't have a million employees that are going to each different municipality working. What they'll do is they'll call local contractors, landscape firms that will help them, and they'll negotiate rates with them. So they'll kind of have like a subcontract with them. And as long as they're meeting the rates that we have with Phillips and Jordan or Southern Disaster Recovery, that's how they're able to do that. So it's just a way to make sure that nobody's upcharging during an event, and that FEMA, they obviously don't want to pay back more than they have to. So that's how that works. These firms will contract with local firms to help aid in the cleanup.
Thanks, and I didn't mean to talk over you. So they move capacity and be doing landscaping one day to recovery the next day.
Pretty much.
We have arrangements in place. Mr. Chairman, Mirabelle, I don't know if you saw this Thursday at the disaster event, but not direct to this, but since you mentioned FEMA reimbursements, I thought it was an interesting chart from the city manager from Sanibel Island that he had a chart of approved FEMA requests, very large, paid FEMA requests, like you just did, 0. So that probably needs to factor into our disaster recovery calculus of what we can realistically expect, especially with political climate right now.
And we,
Disasters, QSC Brook disaster.
Very interesting
Sanibel
presentation in a number of respects by the city manager of Sanibel, which obviously has been hard hit, direct hit, and then hard hit more glancing blows. But I think we should all understand as policymakers, decision makers, that anything regarding field at this point in time is very uncertain. Given just yesterday, the acting head of FEMA said, well, the new plan we were planning to put in place for preparedness is no longer going to happen. Now we'll rely on last year's plan, even though many of the people that are responsible for implementing that are at FEMA.
Well, that high note. What other discussion? Any other discussion?
None for me. Thank you.
And again, we're going to use our current contracts and not.
Well, I mean, this one is a little bit different. So this is an extension, previously entered into contract. My view has been as a pragmatic matter, if we're looking at amending in the current contract or exercising an extension provision, that we're essentially bound by the current form of contract. The issue is whether there are really any truly offending provisions in there, in which case we would address those. There are not in this one.
I mean, if there were, could you do an extension with revisions?
Well, we would certainly seek to do exactly that. This one is like South Carolina. They're indemnifying us, not vice versa.
Phillips and Jordan, the same people who we have the bridge insurance reconstruction with?
Yes. So in their list of capabilities, they do list that as they work with a company. They've got a contract with a company called I think it's Applied Resources that that does temporary bridge installation and decommission. So through them is who we would.
Do we have a specification from them for the bridge, what they would do and when they would do it?
Yes, we actually have, when we talk with them, we have specs for either one-lane bridge or two-lane bridge. So we have.
Would you send me what they would do, what the contract says they would do in the case of?
Mhm.
It's in that link? Okay.
It wasn't at
Was.
the whole contract.
Okay. Then I don't need anything else. So, thank you.
So that contract is part of this then? Is that what I understood or?
I'm sorry, what's your
That's kind of
concern?
one of, that would be one of their I would contact Phillips and Jordan, and then they would get in touch with their people.
So that's part of this?
Yeah, it's just part of it.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's not separate.
They have a whole laundry list of different services that they offer too. If we have to have a tent, they just have a whole laundry list that we can go and check stuff in case.
So this is more than debris management.
Could be.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Philip and Jordan.
I didn't catch that. Thanks. Kim, I didn't catch that.
I mean, it's everything that comes with an emergency, whether it be natural or man-made emergency. But typically around here, we're thinking about hurricanes, so that's why we call it kind of a debris management contract. But their capabilities go far and beyond that.
And that is what we principally utilized under this contract and the previous is debris management. It's either cut, toss, or going beyond that.
In the couple of previous storms, have they done it or have they used local contractors to do it?
We've actually never executed either one of these contracts. We haven't had. It hasn't been cost effective enough, and we haven't had national declarations that would allow us to seek reimbursement. There's thresholds that need to be met for a municipality to be eligible for reimbursement. There's a local monetary threshold, county level, or excuse me, a state level, and then a national level. And all three of those have to be met for a municipality to be eligible for reimbursement. All that to say, we haven't had that. So it's been cheaper
We have
for us.
FEMA reimbursement in the
We have, but we've just used our own contract. We had contracts for debris removal with local companies. And so they came in and did the removal. Now, what we learned from our last one, which was Dorian, he did that same process and FEMA denied it. And so that's why we said moving forward, we'll use the professional because we didn't have all the requirements in place that the professional services would have. Our local contractors just didn't have it in place.
Sorry, this is a tangential question, but back in the winter when we had the snowstorm, who did the snow removal? Is that Kiko? Was that us? Was that a contractor?
There was a contractor that and I forget how they came about. I think Craig had a contact with a company that brought equipment down here and was able to do scraping. But and Gary Otter.
It's going to say that's good.
Yeah, Gary Otter was able to do a big bulk of it. No, that's what it was. We had Craig knew a salt truck to come down here and salt the roads. Gary Otter, he's a local contractor on the island, but does stuff all over the place. He's got front loaders and equipment that he was able to scrape snow and ice off the roads.
I was going to ask the same thing.
Was that by us or was that Kiko funded?
We did our portion and Kika did their portion.
I remember talking to him about the first gate out.
Yeah.
You got a guy.
Yeah, got a guy.
And he's not signed up with a bunch of other guys.
Right. Yeah, so it was just kind of like an hourly rate. Yeah.
Any other discussion? So we have a motion to approve all three of these as one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Mr. Guttalk. Chairman's report. I think I've talked enough today. Anything I would say is more about kind of our SATAX approach and things we want to do going forward. So I'm just going to let the record stand for Chairman's report.
Yes, so I have the 10 months here for you for your review. So our total revenues of 14.4 million. are about 1.2 million higher than when compared to last year for 10 months, and are about 93% of the total budgeted revenues. All the revenues are within the budget or will exceed the budget. And for sure, the building permits, interest revenues, and I'm projecting that all our revenues, as it was very conservative projections, are going to be over. Our expenditures.
Before you leave that,
Yes.
remind me again what building permit special projects is.
So that was for the lower and upper beach walker. Just the one-time projects that we don't really, not ongoing.
Were we going to refund that and rebuild it, or
Correct. So we collected last year. And then the contractor changed. The price of the project has changed. So we refunded them and then received the new amount, which was a little higher than the original.
so we did refund them and we
Correct.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Our expenditures are about 10.2 million and are about 727,000 higher than last year for the 10 months, and account of 72% of the total budgeted expenditures. And at this time, they all look reasonable and within the budget, so we should not see any overages in any of the categories.
I mean, the good news is we're trending under budget on the revenue, so revenues will be more than budgeted,
Yes.
and our expenditures will be less.
Less than the budget, yes. So a good trend.
Sorry, you talk faster than I can think. So, but I do have another question about the revenue, the interest. We're over by almost $500,000. Do you remember what interest rate we projected last year?
4%, but also we projected some expenditures that will reduce our total investment. So we pretty much
We're projecting 4% again this year too, right?
yes. Mm-hmm.
And then go ahead and finish your statement. So we had some expenditures.
So we haven't, as you can see, we still haven't spent everything. So every month I look at our bank and see what's the minimum so we don't pay any hard fees, and I move the money. So because of that too, our investments have risen, and hence there is more investment income than budgeted.
Yes. So for this committee, we might expect, since there's been a delay in the Fed, we might expect an overage, maybe not as big as this overage forward, but right now I'd expect probably some overage for next year based on the slow movement of the Fed. And I don't mean that in a critical way. I mean the appropriately slow movement of the Fed.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Citizen comments.
Well, I see citizen back there in the back row, maybe.
Yes, there's none. Committee member comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Appreciate everything you all today and staff did on this. Thank you.
And I'm just again want to say thank you to the audit committee. Again, I think we've got a great audit committee. We've got some great feedback on kind of proposal from M&J, and they're I'm kind of tickled to death with where we are with the audit committee and their involvement. So thank you to those guys. And with that, if there's nothing else, comments? No. We're adjourned.